That Donald Trump has dismantled the world order as we know and understand it is not in dispute. But could this be, in fact, to India's advantage? Are we standing at a moment where the West is declining and it is, to borrow from a new book, The Era of India, it is a moment for the rise of the rest, in particular India? Veteran author and journalist Minhas Merchant makes this argument in his compelling and deeply researched book, where he says that India is standing at a moment which is not just an inflection point, but could be ushering in transformative change. So while the dismantling of the world order as we understand it looks alarming, we should not be alarmed, but optimistic. In a moment from now, we'll be talking to the author himself. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. Donald Trump has created rare global consensus, and the consensus is this: Trump does not play by any norms as we understand them. But as Canada's leader Mark Carney pointed out, the rules-based order was always somewhat of a myth. Trump has just stripped that mythology of its veneer, leaving it naked for the entire world to see. In the many standoffs that India has had with the United States, whether during Operation Sindoor or in recent negotiations on the trade agreement, at times it has seemed and felt like India has had to accept things from the United States of America that feel deeply unpalatable. But now a new book by Minhas Merchant argues that the United States of America, and in fact Western nations in general, are on their way down. And the pivot of power is shifting, and it is shifting distinctly towards Asia. And India is at the center of gravity of many of these changes. In fact, the Era of India argues that in the next 25 years, we will see changes as transformative for the world as the Industrial Revolution once was. Let me welcome now our newsmaker on the program today, Minhas Merchant, senior journalist, prolific author, is with us. Congratulations on your extremely deeply researched, very compelling book. Why are you not alarmed with the disorder that Trump is creating? Why do you, in fact, see it as a moment that captures the beginning of the end of Western hegemony, American exceptionalism, and a moment which can only lead, according to you, to the rise and rise of India?
Yeah, but thank you. The basic reason for the book is to set the record straight. We have been hostage to a West-oriented narrative for centuries. And the soft power of the English language, film, television, and everything else has made it clear that the West had a civilizing mission. Now, obviously, the West did do a lot of good things, and they talk about that incessantly. But they do not talk, nor do Indians talk about the bad things that were done. Sure, there have been a few books on that, but not enough, and not with the kind of precision and outcomes that should actually happen in the way that our book talks about. So to set the record straight, we have to have context. And the context is where we were. Not only, I'm not going to end with Madison and what other people have written about, the GDP, etc., right from 180. No, where we were before British colonization began, where we are today, and where we will be in 2050. So looking at that situation, in 1700, the average per capita income of an Indian and an Englishman or a Dutchman or a Frenchman was roughly similar, 1-to-1, around $600. And this has been empirically proved by a number of historians and economists. 1-to-1, 1700. Then 1757, and the East India Company, Robert Clive, Battle of Palashi, and the Nawab of Bengal, and so on. The conquest of India started, and the extortion of tax revenue began. For the next 190 years, during the colonization of India, our growth rate, which was 2% a year during the Mughal Empire and before that, which was the same as it was in Europe, that 2% went down to 0%, Zero, not even 0.1% for 200 years. Now, the consequence of that was obvious. And what is the consequence? In 1947, the extreme poverty rate in India was 80%. It's 5% today, 79 years later. Literacy was 12%. It's now 79%, almost 80% after 79 years. Life expectancy was 32 years in 1947. Now it's about 71. So the kind of depredations that were inflicted upon India by the West, that's been completely hidden, except for the occasional book. But that is immediately challenged by a counter narrative, an apology by other people. So,
In fact, the word you use in your book is you say India was a kind of destitute at the time that the country became independent. And therefore,
absolutely,
when we understand the growth of India, you have to actually understand the starting point of India as an independent nation.
absolutely, you've got it just right. That we inherited in 1947 a broken economy. As I said, the three rates I told you about, 80% poverty and so on and so forth, literacy and lifespan. It was a broken economy. Um, and so you look at the starting point. We don't look at 1700, but 1947 and where we've come. Gradually building up from 0% for 200 years growth rate to 2%, 3% under the Nehruvian growth rate of 3 to 3.5% for a number of decades. And then under Manmohan Singh, going up to 5, 6%, and then now 7%. So an average of about 5% here. But just imagine, Barkha, that if our growth rate during those 200 years of the British colonization of India had not been 0%, but even 2%, which is what the rest of the world, Japan and other countries experienced, if we had been 2%, we would double our per capita every 35 years, mathematically. How many cycles of 35 years are there in 200 years? Approximately 6, which means 2 to the power of 6. I'm not trying to be too mathematical, but 2 to the power of 6 is basically 2 multiplied 6 times over, and that is 64. 2 into 2 into 2 6 times is 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64. In 1947, 64. What's my per capita income in 1947 with 0% growth rate for 200 years? While the rest of the world was growing at 2 or 3%, enjoying the Industrial Revolution. Our per capita income was $100. Just imagine what our per capita income, even adjusting for inflation and exchange rates and so on, what it would have been in 1947 if we had not been under that particular yoke. So yeah, the starting point, as you rightly said, is where we start. What we will now do with all the problems that we still have, I am not minimizing the problems that we face. We face tremendous problems, and
Yeah.
there are solutions for each one of them to fulfill our tryst with destiny. What Nehru wanted to do, it's halfway full. But when we have a half full glass of water, it's correct to say it's half full, and we've got to fill the entire glass. But what do our negative-minded people in our country, fairly small percentage, but a vocal percentage, say? They don't say it's half empty, which you would expect a normal negative-minded person to say. They say it's fully empty. So a half full glass of water is not half empty, which you can expect some people to say. It's completely empty. So we've got to build our
So,
self-confidence.
putting the naysayers to one side, and I'm certainly not one of them, and speaking as one proud Indian to another, let us still focus on some of the challenges thrown up
Yeah,
by this sort of world dismantling of the world order. And your book makes the argument that it isn't Trump who began this wreckage. Carney and others have pointed out that there was always a bit of a sham quality to the world order as we imagined it. My question is somewhat different. In the last year, year and a half, India has had to often walk alone. Operation Sindoor, you had China and Pakistan converging against us. In the months that followed, because of the friction with Donald Trump, you had the Pakistanis cozying up to Washington, while China, placing a protective hand on their head. There have been there has been an internalization after all the tension with Trump over the tariffs. We may be at a better place today. That India will have to forge our own path. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, not as a naysayer, but as a proud Indian.
Yeah, no, Barkha, the point is that, you know, when you inherit a broken economy, you repair it. And I have absolutely no complaints about what Nehru did after 1947 when he introduced public sector units and so on, because we had nothing, no steel capacity, no cement capacity, nothing. We were totally deindustrialized, apart from our textile industry being destroyed and so on. So what he did was fine, but it takes decades. 79 years or 78 years after independence. Look at America. What were they in the year 1850 odd? Approximately 78 years from 1776. Add 80 years approximately, and you are into 1856. America was on the verge of a civil war 10 years later. There was disease, poverty, conflict, usurpation of Native American land, the transatlantic slave trade, slave ownership, Ku Klux Klan would come much later, of course. So, given the fact that we had a very short period of time after independence, we made many, many mistakes. But as you pointed out a minute ago, there have been positive developments, and we've got to build on them. Whether it's for our China policy with America, people are criticizing the Indo-USD.
Hmm.
The India-EU deal has been widely praised because it's very comprehensive. The deals with the United Kingdom, with the UAE, with Australia, with New Zealand, with Oman, etc., have been praised. But India and America, it's been a client patron partnership. So
Mhm.
that's criticism. But we've got to realize that we're dealing with a person like Trump,
Yeah.
who has insulted Canada, insulted Denmark, insulted Europe, and people who are his people. He's half British and half German himself. His mother, Mary MacLeod, was a Scottish immigrant to America in 1930 when she was 18. And his father, of course, Fred, was a son of a German immigrant. The people closest to him have come under the cosh by Trump. Now, to deal with a man like that, Modi and his government had to tread a fine line. Either you know, do the Brazil thing, which is like
Hmm.
Lula, give up your relationship to a large extent, or you walk that fine line, be patient, uh, don't be confrontational, but at the same time, do not give in. Now, on a couple of issues, like in any give and take, you have to give a bit and you have to take a bit. The statement that was issued by the White House last night or this morning, our time, doesn't mention a couple of things. It's basically a manifesto for the MAGA base of Trump. That look, we are doing everything for the American people. We signed a historic trade deal with India, an important partner. It doesn't say what good that trade deal will do to India, but just America, America, and America. It's America first. That's the MAGA base, which is getting disenchanted with Trump because it's not doing the
Yeah.
two things the MAGA base wants. No foreign policy interference in Gaza, in Ukraine, etc., and focus on affordability, focus on jobs and inflation. Now, Trump hasn't done that. For the MAGA base, and you've seen day before yesterday in Louisiana, they lost
Hmm.
a state election, state house election, earlier in Virginia. So it's almost inevitable, Barkha, that by November, which is not very far away, the House of Representatives is going to go to the Democrats. And that will straitjacket Trump completely. His entire policy agenda will now be straitjacketed, and he will be on the way to being a lame duck president. And by January, the primaries will begin next January. And we'll
Yeah.
see like the Republican contenders like J.D. Vance and the Democrats, whether it's Gavin Newsom or whoever. And attention will swing away from Trump. He will be quasi history at the age of 80, because he'll turn 80 in June.
Yeah. I think a number of Indians would be very happy to see that unfold if that were indeed the case. But let me ask you, I agree with you that as a reactive, fiercely proud Indian, when Trump would keep making very annoying comments, initially my feeling was, why don't we react publicly? And I think India actually handled it well by not being drawn into public argumentation. That said, sir, when you see a statement from Trump's executive order, when he signed the executive order to lift the 25% punitive tariff and said that America would continue to monitor the purchase of Russian oil, and if India directly or indirectly purchased Russian oil, then that tariff could be reimposed. It is galling. It is galling,
It is.
especially in a post colonial society like ours, where
Absolutely.
memories of the empire are very fresh. Now,
True.
the government has chosen, India has chosen not to react sharply to this, to
Yeah.
kind of circumvent it, to maybe hope Russia, Ukraine will solve itself. So this issue will become infructuous. Or as you said, Trump will weaken politically. Do you think that's the wise approach for a great power? Because your book spends a lot of time talking about great powers, also Trump's view of tripolar view of the world, where he looks at China and Russia as the other two great powers.
Yeah, but I just want to make one particular clarification here, that initially, two clarifications actually. Initially, the title of the book was with a strap title, a small strap title, The Unfolding Era of India. And Penguin and I talked about it. I said, look,
Yeah.
it is unfolding, because do not give the impression, I'm not trying to say that this is the era of India. It is an unfolding era of India over the next 25. It mentions that clearly. Even the flaps on the two, the inside and back flap make that clear. The according to Penguin, and I respect that completely, they felt it would be too cluttered on the cover, so we went with Era of India. But it's made clear throughout the prologue and the author's note in the first chapter, the second chapter, we are talking about a process, the unfolding era of India. Now, in a situation like that, where we have not actually come to a point where we can have our own way completely,
Yeah.
we have to compromise. And I think, to answer your question more directly, has Modi compromised too much with the Russian oil thing, that we will snap back the 25% if because we'll monitor you, and that's
Yeah.
colonial. Of course it is. But then Trump is a colonial person. He said that on a number of occasions, and he models himself on President McKinley, who was in office in 1897 to 1901. He was assassinated 2 months in September of 1901, before the election in November 1901. He, McKinley, on whom Trump models himself, actually was a colonial man. And he said, we conquered, and he went and conquered the Philippines and Puerto Rico and many other places. So Trump is an unabashed colonial person. And his entire record, from the time he inherited his real estate empire from his father Fred in the 1960s, the mid 1960s, and drove four of his companies, including casinos and hotels, into bankruptcy, has been based on racism. There are black and and Hispanic people who have not been actually allowed to rent apartments in Trump buildings. So, he has always been a white supremacist. And two of his major cabinet people are unabashed white supremacists: Peter Hegseth, the defense secretary, and his deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller. So, for a person like that, who you're dealing with, insults Canada, insults his European allies, NATO, and everyone else, has a raid on 300 Korean workers. And South Korea is an ally of America, and arrests them and deports them. India has been actually not the target of that ire. You've not seen Trump lambasting India in racist terms or in supremacist terms or even in hectoring terms. So this Russia thing will snap back is the minimal language that you would expect from a person like Trump.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. I do take your point that Trump is clearly colonialist, and you do write about how America has in fact regressed as it transforms internally to the demographics within the United States are changing. That's the first point you make about what's happening inside America. But do you think that everybody got Trump wrong in his second term, when initially it was assumed that MAGA, Make America Great Again, would see Trump only focused on his own backyard? In fact, what Donald Trump is attempting to do is to be a neo-colonialist. And
Yeah.
India's challenge is faced with this one neo-imperialist in the form of Trump, and a very different kind of economic neo-imperialism in the form of China. So I want you to talk about both of these challenges.
Yeah. You see, here there are a couple of important points. Number one, it's slightly off tangent, but it's important. America demographically is going to be, for the first time in 400 years, a minority white country by 2050. It's at the moment, if you take away the Hispanics from white people, right now it's about 65% white. It's going down by 0.5% a year. In less than 30 years, it'll be down to 49% white people of European origin, and that's going to make America increasingly the Brazil of North America, um, because Brazil is completely multiracial. That is going to have a huge impact on the way it conducts its foreign policy in the coming decades. So that's an important point that we have to focus on. But as far as him being a neo-colonial is concerned, we've also got to keep in mind that after November, he's going to be pretty much a lame duck. In January of next year, definitely attention will be away from him. How India plays its part in the context of China and America. Now, that's an important point. I just take a couple of minutes on, because America knows, at least intelligent people in America know, there aren't that many in Trump's cabinet, but other people in America who are thoughtful know that there are only three countries that will matter in the next decade, not 2050, but by 2035. Only three countries. And that's America, China, and India. They know that. And the reason for that is not just economics and all that, is the markets, the technology, and everything else that India is now. We are at the point of inflection. Past 7 or 8 years, we've had black swan events, COVID, 2 years gone, the two wars, trade down, Trump again, trade down, the 25% thing, etc. So we've had 6, 7 difficult years. Now we're at a takeoff point, an inflection point. 10 years from now, only three countries will matter: China, America, India. And of that, the two countries that are together in that triangle of power will actually call the shots. So that is why the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, at, uh, uh, at a BRICS conference, I think about last September or October, said that India and China must have a ballet of two, a pas de deux, as he said in French. And that means basically a tango, or a ballet of two people, of two countries, the elephant and the dragon. Because China knows how important it is to keep
But
India
what if
on side.
but what if Trump cuts a deal with China?
Sorry?
What if Donald Trump tries to cut a deal with China?
No, no. Trump Trump is a guy who has two basic concerns. Number one, he likes strong men. That's why Vladimir Putin, who he admires, because he's a tough guy. And
Mhm.
Trump wants to be a tough guy now. He dodged the Vietnam draft in 1966, at the peak of the Vietnam War, because of bone spurs and other things. So he likes guys with uniform. First term, all his people were generals and admirals. He just loves that. Xi Jinping is another strong man whom he admires. So Trump knows that China is a competitor, but he's trying to make a deal with them. He's quite practical in that. And then also Barkha realized that Trump knows that his there's no third term. His game is over. Not only in November, but from January when the primaries start, it's over for Trump. So he's going to leave a scorched earth policy. There's going to be no third term. There's going to be no Trump from next year onwards in the kind of way he is dominating everybody. And therefore, he's trying to make a deal with China because of the crypto thing, and I mean, China's banned
Yeah.
crypto. But the way Trump behaves in Gaza, the Riviera, it's a real estate thing for him. I mean, he and particularly his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, the way they've dealt with Gaza, the way they've dealt with even Ukraine for that matter. So three countries will matter. America desperate to have India on its side, which is why very, very reluctantly they've signed this deal, 25% off, 18%,
Mm.
etc. And China also wants India on its side because China is facing three problems. One is demographic. It's completely falling off the cliff. They're losing millions of people every single year. And
Mm.
the population, as per the United Nations projection, by the end of the century is going to be 733 million. It's half of today. The productivity will be finished. So, sorry. So, the demographic problem is going to make China's long-term economic growth, GDP growth, fall to about 3%. It's already 4.5%. That's also
Yeah.
fudged. It's going to fall to 3%. Then they have a problem of diversity, no diversity, like America has through immigration. We have organically complete diversity. The Han are 92% ethnically of the Chinese. And third is no democracy. Again,
Yes.
Africa, India have democracy, a noisy, vibrant democracy, and we see that playing out in the
Yeah.
media in all kinds of stuff, abusive,
Yeah.
and all kinds of. So China knows that it needs India on its side, and therefore it's playing hot and cold because China has the Middle Kingdom um, arrogance that hasn't completely dissipated, but it will dissipate. America
Mm.
had its colonial and post World War II Cold War winning arrogance. That hasn't dissipated either. With Trump, it's gone up, but that also will dissipate. And my book, apart from that stuff, the unfolding era of India, the other title that the book was going to have, but for other reasons it didn't, was Fall of the West, Rise of the because when um, Niall Ferguson wrote his book Civilization, the West and the rest, I can think of no more hubristic and arrogant title. The West and the rest are just by the way. But the fall of the West and the rise of the rest, because 80% of global GDP is going to go to the rest, and 20% will stay in the West, which is why Elon Musk and others talk about Western civilization being on the back foot and Western civilization being in trouble. Yeah.
Let me ask you in the end, you also write that India's rise is not accidental or episodic. It is a civilizational. This is a country rising again to reclaim its space, rebuilding itself post the ravages of British colonialism as the last sort of conquerors that India had to contend with or invaders. My question to you is, as you look ahead, since you've said it's the unfolding era of India, uh, what do you think will be the critical choices that India will have to make, let's say, in the next 5 years?
But 6 or 7, solutions or issues
Yeah.
that we should focus on. One is healthcare. Absolutely essential that we improve nutrition, health, because a healthy young Gen Z workforce in the future, and Gen whatever comes after Gen Z, Gen Alpha,
Yeah.
we top class health clinics, tertiary clinics, and so on. Education. We have to get out of the rote system of learning, where you mug up things for an exam, get a job, etc., and then go abroad. You've got to have critical thinking, creative thinking, because education, unfortunately, in a way, our faith, our family, and our schools all teach obedience. At home, we have to be obedient. Our faith, obedience, and obeisance also in school. That we're not iconoclastic. So that's education. Then, of course, economically, there are too many regulations. We have to reform our regulatory
Yeah.
ecosystem. and get away from being a nanny state to be a powerful state, where the power comes from the people and entrepreneurs.
Mm.
Um, the fourth is tax reform. I think there's too much of uncertainty. The recent budget, it was shocking to see how sovereign gold bonds have had a retrospective taxation put on it. If you sell them in the market, even though it was actually put in the SGB, the sovereign gold bond, um,
Yeah.
manifesto, that it will be free of tax. They actually say, no, now because gold has gone up so much,
Mm.
you'll be taxed on capital gains at 12.5%. That kind of retrospective taxation is terrible. It makes you unreliable. So tax reform. Then comes civic management, sanitation, civic infrastructure. We have to have elected mayors accountable directly to the people and not to uh, the state government. So civic management, municipalities, Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, all of them have to have proper mayors like you have in New York, London.
Yeah.
And sorry, I think we had an interruption. And finally, corruption, because corruption is a big issue. And if you don't get rid of corruption, see, there's no corruption at the top level now, because Modi has nothing to be corrupt about. He has no wife, no children, no nephews, no nieces, nothing. There's no Modi dynasty, just as there's no major dynasty. So there are at the middle level dynasties, and there is corruption at the civic level, at the state level. Got to get rid of that because corruption is really it's very damaging. So health, education, regulation, tax reform, civic management through proper mayors and accountability, corruption, and finally governance. And governance is such a broad term. Everybody says, good governance, good governance. What does good governance mean? It means that you respect the people as being your sovereign, and that you are nothing but a servant of the people, and you do everything. Everything that you do is for the people of the country and not for yourself. So governance,
Absolutely.
it's institutional or whatever, political, in parliament, outside parliament, good governance is essential for our unfolding era of India to actually meet, to borrow Mr. Nehru's words, its final tryst with destiny.
Well, we'll end on that perfect note, and I'm also glad you flagged urban governance or governance in general, having been a month where we've lost 2 lives to people falling in uncovered pits of water and swamp. So that your closing comments are really a reminder of the basics: healthcare, education, governance, corruption, reform, less government in innovation and business, more government where it's needed, which is improved lives of ordinary people. Thank you, Mr. Merchant. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and congratulations once again on your very deeply researched book, which spans history, culture, politics, foreign policy, and ancient civilizational references as well. Thank you very much, sir. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo's Story and support independent, robust journalism.